Colin, Cameron, it is a pleasure to meet you both. How are you today?
Very
Good.
well, thank
Thanks,
you.
Nick.
Oh, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. I know you guys have done a shitload of interviews, so I really appreciate you taking the time to chat to me because I don't just love horror, but I saw this. I was lucky enough to see it back at Sydney Film Fest last year,
Right.
and I fucking loved this movie. So I'm so excited to talk to you both about it.
Excellent.
And funnily enough, I was sitting in front of Damon Herriman for that
Wow.
session as
Oh,
well.
yeah, we were there. We were at that one. Yeah, yeah.
I was there for the Q&A afterwards, and he loved it as much as I did from what I could hear behind me. So,
Yeah.
and I'm a big fan of 100 Bloody Acres too. So talking to you both is
Thanks.
super exciting. But I sort of want to crack in about the process of there's kind of two different movies happening within Late Night with the Devil, right? We've got Night Owls, and then we've got all the chaos backstage as well. So, and tonally they're different, but they work so well together. But I'm curious to know what your approach was to writing and directing those scenes. Were there any differences to the approach in creating these very two different films?
Yeah, I mean, that was something I think we tried a bunch of different approaches to that in the script. At one stage we were contemplating being complete purists about it and just cutting to color pass for 3 minutes and, seeing if that would build suspense. Then there was a version where maybe the TV cameras kept rolling but weren't framing up as they would on the show.
Right.
So we would just capture the story that we needed to convey incidentally, like out of focus, ground off screen, which also seemed cool. But we felt like, well, if you got 20 minutes of that, it might start to grate.
Yeah, and feel a bit contrived.
Yeah.
Contrived as anything else.
Perhaps more contrived than that. Yeah. So in the end, we settled for this because we have that prologue, which is it's really like a little mini documentary. We thought we'd employ that sort of device to then tell the story of what's happening backstage, to suggest that, this is a very important night in the life of the show and Jack Delroy. And why wouldn't you have a verite handheld crew of 2 cameras backstage documenting this historic evening? So that's sort of what we settled on.
And, I don't know if you pick up on it, but we're suggesting that this film crew are like French documentarians, which maybe gives them a bit more access backstage because, they're speaking French and these Americans are like, oh,
This will never be shown in America. It's going to be one of those arty European things.
Yeah.
So, like probably don't need to say too much, but, there's a couple of snippets of other documentaries, sprinkled throughout the film. And we're kind of suggesting that it's the one crew that's been a little bit embedded in that world. They've got a long-term project to document the Abraxas, the church of the Satanic Church and all that stuff.
You've given me a reason to watch it again tonight, which is pretty exciting. I'm curious to find out about the construction of Night Owls as a concept as well, because one of the things I love are these like little moments you guys do that create a bit of authenticity. So like when you bleep the second time Lily says fuck instead of the first time, you catch that, or like the little boom mic falling at the top of the frame. What were those sort of authenticities? What were you guys looking for to create that really authentic feel within Night Owls?
No, it's interesting you bring those things up. Like the booming shot and the second beep. Nice pickup because the guy up in the booth is obviously
the 2-second delay.
2-second delay.
He's probably out having a ciggy.
Better get back in there. But they were things that we wrote into the script. So
awesome.
and I think they're important little details that just help all people in the production get it. So that's kind of the vision is it's got to look a bit crude. It's got to look a bit shambolic.
Yeah, live TV, things go wrong and they can go very wrong sometimes.
Especially when you're doing some of the things that this film does, I can imagine. I think one of the things I love most about this film and what I love about horror in general is that you can make it fun. Like this is a fun horror film, and a part of that is those small blends of comedy. And I think when Gus comes back from the commercial break and he goes, "Your trusted sidekick's back," and he gets that really mediocre clap, and he's like, "Well, okay, well." I think that's great. That's one of my favorite parts of the comedic parts of the film. What is it about sort of combining what would be two polar opposite genres, and how do you get them to work together so well like that?
Good question. I mean, I don't think we see them as polar opposites, though. I think the world has started in the last 10 years. Like horror has just gone. It's got to be straight up the middle, hardcore, no levity. That's kind of what horror is now. But there was a time going back to the 70s and 80s, the Carpenters and the Joe Dantes and people like that, and even Cronenberg had a dark sense of humor, where the two worked together, and horror was fun. Creepshow and George Romero, all those guys had a really wicked sense of humor.
Yeah.
And we just feel like that works, and we shouldn't forget that it works. So we want to make movies in that vein. And the fact, I mean, it helps that we've got a bit of a comedy background as well, both of us, either as directors, performers, editors. So it's stuff that isn't that, it's not that difficult for us. We know when we can sort of lean into that. And it felt like this was the place to do it. It's a late night talk show. They banter. There's gags about Billy Carter and, Reggie Jackson, and, but also the characters are important. I think, too much stuff now, it gets a bit maudlin and takes itself so seriously. And in real life, there is levity, and there are people do say the wrong thing, and it's funny sometimes. It's like just true to life, we think.
Yeah, it's just, I think it adds to the overall entertaining experience. Like you said, if there's no levity, then you just walk away going like, oh, geez, I've just been assaulted for 90 minutes, right?
Sure.
Because we do assault people as well. That's part of the agenda. But yeah, I think it works better if you've got the light and show.
It's the fun of the horror genre, absolutely. I'd love to ask about casting Ingrid as Lily, because she's fantastic in this film, and her demeanor and the way her demeanor changes, and that creepy stare. What was that process like, and at what point did you realize, Ingrid is our Lily?
Yeah, well, Ingrid came to us through our casting director. We saw, maybe 7 or 8 girls here in Melbourne, and they're all great. But yeah, Ingrid was sort of clearly the front runner, and it was just those eyes, those damn eyes.
It's so good. When she looks up that first time during the possession scene, it's stuck in my brain. It genuinely is.
Yeah. In terms of directing, I mean, she's just very instinctive, and her choices are all awesome and interesting. But it's funny, the eyes, that was kind of our killer note, because I think early on in the production, when we were shooting, we said, look, Ingrid, you don't be afraid to look at the camera. It's all right. This is live TV. And she went, oh, cool. And kind of took that to heart. And, but gosh, yeah.
She said, I think she found the power in it as well. It's like, at first it's kind of, it's cute, this supposedly innocent girl who's, a bit overwhelmed by the environment. You're going to look at the camera and what do I do? But it's her becoming a character with obviously real agency, as we know by the end of it.
Yeah.
I think, it was, if anything, it was a matter of the direction was, look at the camera, but she, not too much. Just knowing when not to look. She, just incredible. She's got a big future ahead of her. Ingrid.
I'm excited to see what she does next. You mentioned a bit earlier about the Joe Dante's and the Cronenberg sort of inspirations, that sort of horror, and I think where you can really feel that nostalgia is the use of practical effects, especially in the worm scene, I'll call it. I won't say too much about that, and I love that as well. So how important was it for you guys to have that use of practical effects, and that sort of, was that a nostalgic throwback as well to those films that you love?
For sure. I don't think it would have felt of the time, period we were trying to set the film in, if we were doing it all digitally. I mean, that's not to say we don't have some digital effect in there. You just have to these days.
Of course.
But keeping it as practical as much as we can has always been our dictum. And
dictum,
is that right?
That's a good. Yeah, I've never heard you use that word before.
So I'm adding that to my vocabulary too. That's good. That seems
get some sleep last night. That's.
Wow, I'm blowing you away.
Wow.
Oh, that's brilliant. I'm curious to find out, just on a personal note, whether you are supernatural skeptics like Carl, or are you guys supernatural believers like June?
Yeah,
I've probably got one foot in the Carmichael camp.
Yeah.
No, both feet. Both feet.
Yeah.
Cole might have half.
I've got half a foot in the. Yep. I think even someone like Carmichael Haig and your James Randys, why are they so obsessed if they're not just a little bit hopeful that they might discover something one day?
Yeah.
They're so adamant it's all bullshit. Just go do something else. But there's this little part of them that, and I'm a bit like that. Like I'm a skeptic, but I'm also open. I'm open to what might be out there, although I doubt that it's out there.
James Randys, my hero. I'll go on record as saying that.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Does that help write characters like that when you sort of have a bit more in common with them? Is that an easier character write than someone like June, or do you feel like you have that?
No, I think with I don't know. My feeling is like when you're writing that character, you just become, you've got to be in their headspace and see the world through their eyes, and that's kind of the fun of it because you're kind of playing a part as well. So
I think you're always having those arguments in your head, aren't you, when you write? And you've got a character like Carmichael. I think you're right. I think maybe there is a little bit of sympathy there, or maybe not sympathy, but a sort of
I know what you mean.
I'm very sympathetic to Dr. June, like who's trying to turn this into a science. Like there are things out there that we don't fully comprehend, and she just wants to investigate them. I think she's also a skeptic to some degree, but she's also a bit more hopeful. We'll find evidence when maybe it's a bit flimsy, but that's okay.
It makes the characters like complex and so entertaining to watch as well, because it's similar. I'm a skeptic, but then at times I'm like, fuck, Carmichael, you're a dick. Like I'm just making it so hard to side with you, but it's so good at it. Like it's fantastic. I kind of want to wrap up on talking about the final sort of 10 minutes of the film, and without spoiling anything, because I genuinely haven't been able to stop thinking about it since Sydney Film Fest. I think the finale of this film is fantastic. And it kind of got me thinking about the importance of opening and closing scenes as well. So how important is it for you both as filmmakers to have such impactful opening and closing scenes? And are there any closing scenes in film that sort of stand out to you as some of your favorites?
Boy. It's important, yes. You want to grab people and you want to finish strong, because people walk out of the cinema, remember it's the last 10 minutes that they're going to probably be talking about. And if you've lost them at that stage, then the film probably hasn't worked. But endings only work if your beginnings work. So you're constantly, and when you're writing and edit and shooting to a degree, but certainly editing, you're jumping back and forth between them, trying to make sure you're setting things up right and paying them off. All of that stuff's important, yes. But as far as films that were a bit of an inspiration, I just happened to watch Audition again recently, which I hadn't seen for 20 years ago that it was made.
Yeah.
And the ending of that, which goes pretty bonkers, a good example where it is a slow burn, but it's a really cool payoff. Is this happening? Is this a dream, a nightmare? And, so that probably was a little influence, that we weren't really that conscious of. That's the only example I can think of right now. With a bonkers ending.
Bonkers ending. Maybe not for you, but it kept entering my head, this Buffy episode. And I'm not a Buffy fan, but there was one, it was a very dreamy episode where, all the characters were sort of interconnecting, and it's maybe do you know? Oh,
no. I just thought of another thing. But
but that kept entering my head for that particular scene. I wish I could give you more details of the episode, but I'm not the biggest Buffy. My partner is, so I was probably over.
Let's get her on the line now, shall we?
It's funny where those influences come from, though. Those things that stick through.
I was just thinking Dead of Night. That classic. It's a British sort of anthology film from 1945 or 6. Right. If you haven't seen it, you need to see it. It's like it was the best of that sort until Creepshow, but it's probably actually better than that even. It's really cool. But that ends in a kind of way where all these different short stories connect up. Like there's a character that runs through the location of each of these stories, and it goes all that was the one that was in the back of my head, I have to say. There you go.
That's awesome. That's so good. Hey, Colin, Cameron, I really do appreciate you guys taking the time to chat today. I love this movie, like I said, and it's been sitting on my mind for a year. I'm so glad it's getting a cinema release here in Australia. So congratulations on the film, and I really hope we get to talk again soon, nerd out about some horror again on the next one.
Right.
Thanks, man.
That was fun. Thanks, Nick.